I am not a financial advisor, and I never give financial advice on this channel. 100% of this content is for entertainment purposes only.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep.
Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. It's Lane here with ngsәЛąṕəɁ. Today I'm going to be going over XRP, Bitcoin, as well as Ethereum, including some of the heat maps from each. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into the video. First, taking a look at the XRP chart, which as you can see I've cleaned up considerably as it was getting far too messy, which was likely making it very hard to understand. But there's really not much to report here as far as the charts are concerned. We were lingering around this area right here for quite some time. We have jumped up through the equilibrium zone, although we have yet to form a full body candle with the wicks included above it. This level down here held very well, which is a bullish order block. Keep in mind this is on the 4-hour chart. Price is trading up above the upper trend line just slightly, but it is having a lot of trouble with this bearish fair value gap right here on the daily chart. You can see the price pushed up right here to the positive 2 line on my Fibonacci chart, nearly exactly, and is now playing around in the realm just above the equilibrium line in the upper quadrant. The head and shoulders pattern that we formed right here has broken through this shadow line. We're currently trading above the 200-day moving average, and it's not uncommon for these types of patterns to do a retest of that right shoulder. But at this point, with Bitcoin being so bullish, it's hard to say what exactly is going to happen here. This is something we'll have to keep an eye on, especially how it's playing pinball between this bearish fair value gap and this bullish order block. Taking a look at the heat map, you can see that there's a high concentration of liquidity down here trading below current price at this previous low, centered right here at about that 227 level, with much less liquidity resting above the higher levels. Looking at the monthly chart, you can see down here that there's a lot of liquidity in that same area, but the lower range liquidity that we have been talking about for the last couple of weeks that's resting at about that 183 to about 203 level, we cannot see on this particular chart anymore, as it's resting below this area. But you can see very clearly that XRP is kind of in the middle of this liquidity here and this higher concentration of liquidity here. Price has also swept this previous high right here with this candle, which makes it very likely to me that we could see it mop up this liquidity at some point here very soon, depending on what happens with Bitcoin, as it is leading the market by far. So at this point, whatever Bitcoin does is going to decide the fate of many of these coins. And as you know, XRP is waiting on a piece of vital news that could very well change how the price has been trading for the last week or so. So this is something that we'll want to keep an eye on, as it's been fairly unpredictable for quite some time now. Now taking a look at the Ethereum chart, this is also on the 4-hour chart. It's now trading above the equilibrium zone. It's formed a full body candle, wicks included, just above the positive 2 line on my Fibonacci's. It just took out this weak doji waterfall right here on the 4-hour, which was filled at the 2,680 level. It's also trading above the Gaussian channel. There's a good chance that price could fall back, retesting the equilibrium zone, likely in this upper quadrant, perhaps even down to the equilibrium line itself. We also have this weak doji reverse waterfall right here at around that 2,478 level, but with the strength that Ethereum's been showing lately, it will likely, just as it was with XRP, be up to Bitcoin to decide what is going to happen with Ethereum at this point. It would be a very good sign if price traded up here, taking out this previous high. And keep in mind that this bullish order block we have down here, centered at about that 2,311 level, has been tapped into for liquidity right here in this area and held very strong. So it's very likely that we might not come back to these levels, barring Bitcoin taking some time off from its bullish momentum and revisiting some of those lower levels. Taking a look at the heat map, this is the 2-week. You can see that there's a little bit of liquidity resting up here. It did take out the most concentrated area in this area right here at about that 2,656 level. There is a little bit of liquidity resting down in this area on the chart as well. But jumping over to the 1 month really tells you the story here. that the liquidity isn't really as thick as one would think, which really makes you wonder, are that many people really that interested in trading Ethereum at this point anyway? As a lot of people have lost faith in it with its high gas fees and a lot of the information surrounding Ethereum that has come out lately. There is a little bit of liquidity resting right here, but overall the highest concentration of liquidity on the charts is remaining down here at a much lower price at about that 1724 level. So I would keep that in mind, because if the algorithm starts seeking liquidity to fill orders, that really might force Ethereum at some prices that people really don't want to see right now. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but there's really not much liquidity here. Popping over to the 12-hour, you can actually see that the highest concentration on this particular chart is resting right here at about that 2684 level, which is just above these previous highs in this range right here. So in the short term, there's not a lot of options for liquidity unless it starts to make some really nice roller coaster moves rolling into these upper ranges, perhaps even into these lower ranges, just basically gathering up whatever liquidity it can find that's available. So this will be very interesting to watch. Having such a lack of liquidity on this chart, if money does start flooding out of Bitcoin and going into Ethereum, we should start seeing liquidity pools popping up, which would be a telltale sign that a lot more money is flooding into Ethereum, which could be a good sign, especially in terms of an alt season. For additional information and exclusive perks, do consider joining me and the rest of our community on Patreon. Now taking a look at Bitcoin, which has just been completely railroading the market. First thing I want you to notice here is that I have adjusted my equilibrium zone from this point here to up here, which I believe is a much more accurate place to put it. But Bitcoin broke through the equilibrium zone and is trading up here near the red lines, which on the 4-hour chart are right around that 111,455 and upwards here of about that 112,223 level. We also have this upper trend line right here, which is about the only trend line that we can mark on the charts, which is coming off these two previous points here, one from December and one from January. Because we are now in no man's land since we can no longer draw on information from the charts from the past. We have a weak doji reverse waterfall right here on the 4-hour at about that 103,533. We also have one down here at about that 99,000, and price is currently trading well above the 200-day moving average. At some point, these two are going to come back into contact with each other. It's also trading well above the Gaussian channel, but it appears like it might be running out of steam in this area, but this very well could be another phase of accumulation, which could turn into a leg higher. But if price does start to come down, I would keep an eye on the equilibrium zone as possible support. If it breaks through here, I would start to think about the Bitcoin cup and handle video that I just released, which could be another possibility of how things could go if Bitcoin falls down below the rim line and starts to build a handle, building us essentially a cup and handle pattern on the daily chart, which could lead to a much bigger move down the road. The one thing that I fear with Bitcoin is that it continues to move up too quickly, leaving too much liquidity behind, because that could shorten the lifespan of this bullish move, causing Bitcoin to have to turn back around and revisit these lower levels down the road much sooner than it would have to had it mopped up that liquidity properly. So if we continue to see a big move up, getting above this trend line, perhaps retesting and moving upwards, the odds of a major pullback down to those lower ranges of liquidity down the road will increase dramatically. So if you're one of these people that are holding Bitcoin and you start to get to those higher levels, you might want to consider taking some of the Bitcoin off the table rather than writing it back down to these levels, which would be far more likely than us coming down and mopping them up now before the move. So the best thing that could happen is price dropping below that rim line, forming a nice handle, taking some time, building momentum, then breaking out, taking out this all-time high, then moving to higher levels. Ultimately, that's what I would like to see. Now, taking a look at the heat map, this is the 2-week, you can see that there's not a ton of liquidity up here on this particular chart. And the gap between current price and the major liquidity pool is considerable, running down here at about the 99,000 level up to about the 102, which goes along with what I was just talking about. Look how far price would have to come down to gather this liquidity pool. Taking a look at the monthly, You can see this liquidity pool here with a massive amount of liquidity resting down here below that 93,000 and just above that 90,000 range as well. So that does make me a little bit nervous seeing these big liquidity pools with major gaps in between, and especially to where price is trading now. If the liquidity runs out, price is likely not going to have any choice but to revisit this one at a bare minimum. So the best thing for Bitcoin would be to see this come back and at least mop up this liquidity. And even though it would seem bearish in the short term, if it could mop up a chunk of this liquidity before moving higher, that could be even better. But zooming in on the daily, it makes the short-term picture come up much clearer than looking at the other time frames. You can see that we do have some liquidity up in this area, moving up to about that 115,500 range, with about an equal amount of liquidity resting under it, moving down to that 106,000 range, with the highest concentration resting right around that 109,000 level. So this will be very interesting to see what happens, because price could come down, take out these liquidity levels. Generally, it likes to hit the most concentrated areas first, but at the same time, it could come up and mop this up. But I've been seeing a lot of predictions of people saying 140, 150,000. And while I do believe that Bitcoin will hit those levels at some point, I don't think it's going to happen anywhere near as quickly as most people are thinking. It's going to take time. It's going to take patience. The last thing you want to see is Bitcoin jump up to higher levels without taking this liquidity, because it will almost guarantee that that move will be short-lived. We need to see a nice consolidation, setting highs, taking out lows, setting higher highs, setting higher lows, gathering the liquidity properly so that it can move up for distribution to those higher levels. Short of having that, it's going to be very erratic and likely will not hold those high prices for long, which means if anybody chases it in that pattern, that the people that chase it to the upside might end up regretting it to a very high degree. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but oftentimes that is the case. So it's just something to think about, something to keep your eye on. So thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please do me a favor and hit the like button. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps out the channel, and I would appreciate it greatly. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Look at them, they're everywhere!
I don't know. Maybe they can see Valley 5th and the Spring.
Now hold on. You ain't the first son of a bitch to wake up out of their dream.